In Kiev, Ukraine, an unknown agent known just as the protagonist helps the CIA with a mission to stop an Opera siege and recover a stolen plutonium stash. He appears to be on a mission to rescue a man as well, and he accomplishes this with the aid of a team by combining in with SWAT groups. The fake plutonium is discovered during the operation. Additionally, the protagonist discovers that the opera was being bombed, so, he gathers the bombs to protect the people. A masked gunman with a red string on his back saves the protagonist from being held at gunpoint by one SWAT member. A time-reversed gun seemed to be being used by the masked figure. The protagonist throws the bomb bag into the trash, saving the lives of the onlookers. After being kidnapped, he is tormented until he bites on what appears to be a suicide pill, at which point he finally confesses. The protagonist discovers that the pill was a test of his loyalty upon awakening. He is also informed that his team didn't receive clarification. With only the knowledge that the word tenet and a cross-fingered gesture will open many doors for him, he gets accepted into a covert organization. The protagonist breaks into a building where he discovers that technology has been created in the future that enables objects to have their entropy reversed and travel backward in time. A scientist hands him some reverse-firing bullets to show him how this works. A battle, according to the scientist, is about to break out as a result of objects being transmitted back in time from the future. With the aid of British intelligence operative Neil, the protagonist infiltrates the Mumbai home of an Indian billionaire while tracking the metal used to make the reversed bullets. He finds out that Priya, the billionaire's wife, is the one who is actually aware of what is going on. Priya informs the protagonist that a Russian armaments dealer named Andrei Sadar, who can communicate with the future, is in charge of the time-reversing technology. When Sir Michael Crosby first meets the protagonist, he informs him that an explosion occurred in the now-defunct Russian city of Stalsk-12. He advises the protagonist that in order to contact his practically estranged wife Kat and talk to Sadar, he must first talk to Kat. In a restaurant, the protagonist and Kat meet and discuss. Kat informs the protagonist that Sadar is in control of her as a result of a fake artwork she provided him. She also says that she attempted to fall in love with him once more in the hopes that he would release her, but Sadar gave her the choice to either stay or go and never see her kid again. She claims that while they were on vacation in Vietnam, she witnessed a woman dive off their yacht. Soon, Sadar's men show up to the eatery. Although one of them drives off with Kat as the protagonist is about to finish the last henchman, the protagonist manages to battle his way out and escape. Later, the protagonist makes an attempt to gain Kat's trust by obtaining the painting from an airport Freeport in Oslo. Neil assesses the situation first, and they decide to use a cargo plane crash to ignite a fire that will trigger the lockdown procedure and allow them to grab the painting. They enlist Mahir's assistance, who distracts everyone by crashing the plane and scattering gold bars across the road. However, during the operation, two masked men, one facing forward and the other inverted, who had just emerged from a Pentagon temporal threshold assaulted the protagonist and Neil. Before the protagonist and Neil can identify the attackers, they both flee. When the protagonist meets Priya, she informs him that the two rivals were the same person. Returning to Kat, the protagonist solicits her assistance in meeting Sadar. Kat arranges for the protagonist to attend a dinner party thrown by Sadar, but the oligarch does not believe the protagonist until he mentions opera. When Sadar and the protagonist are talking about plutonium while sailing, Kat knocks Sadar off the boat. Kat is upset with the protagonist for saving him. Sadar claims to be in debt, so he gives the protagonist money to help him steal weapons-grade plutonium. The protagonist and Neil successfully take the orange case containing plutonium from an armored vehicle as part of their highway heist, but an inverted car interrupts them. They are being pursued by a car when they notice a reversed Sadar in it holding a forward Kat at gunpoint. A Saab that is wrecked on the highway reverses and moves backward in between them. When the protagonist receives the command from Sadar to deliver over the plutonium, he instead hands over an empty orange case and throws the material into the Saab. The protagonist discovers Sadar and his gang's scheme. They are using a temporal pincer movement to travel both forward and backward in time by performing the operation, then entering a temporal style to travel backward in time. Sadar kills Kat at the temporal junction and flees with her before Neil can manage call for help, who then shows up and closes the temporal gate. Neil is questioned by the protagonist about who these guys are since he suspects them. They are Priya's men, according to Neil, and Ives is their leader. Despite being warned about it, the protagonist pursues Sadar back through the temporal gate, where he discovers that he is the Saab's driver. He waits for it to get back into a car before placing a radio on an empty orange case on the road. Sadar observed the plutonium flying from the Saab back into the hands of the forward protagonist. It turns out after he follows it From the device, he learns that Sator had put together the algorithm that was being transported to the hypocenter. During the pursuit, the Saab crashes, killing the protagonist inverted inside. Sator gets to grab the algorithm piece off-screen and burns the car that turns to ice. Ives' squad succeeds in rescuing the protagonist. Sator, who is discovered to have incurable pancreatic cancer, has become omnicidal and feels that if he is going to die, he would rather spread death throughout all of humanity. Instead of plutonium, Sator is searching for some algorithm, 9 pieces of fake plutonium, that will allow the world's entropy time direction to change. The algorithm will be developed in the future by a scientist as a mechanism to go back in time because the decisions made by mankind now have damaged their future Earth. The algorithm will be used by Sator as a doomsday weapon to destroy everything on Earth by reversing entropy for the entire planet. The device is attached to a dead man's switch that is related to his heartbeat, and he intends to go back to a moment when he was content with Kat and set it off at that point. In a cargo ship container, the protagonist, Neil, and Kat return to Oslo after Sator travels backward in time. The trio breaks into the Freeport Art Storage Facility once more, where they enter the temporal style that enables Kat to advance through time once more and have her gunshot wound healed. The protagonist quickly realizes that he was the unidentified enemy during their initial operation at the Freeport and must battle his former self in order to succeed. The protagonist encounters Priya and asks her to inform his former self of Sator's peril. She claims, however, that she won't stop what is about to take place. The main character needs her assurance that Kat will be secure. This is due to the fact that she has seen too much of Elusa and that they are attempting to keep a secret. Priya promises to honor it. She also tells him that Tenet will be established later. She claims that Ives has a team together and ready to go. While Kat is with her husband on his yacht, trying to keep him from committing suicide before the doomsday device is retrieved, the military operation is launched where the protagonist and Neil try to retrieve the doomsday device from Sator's men from the future in Stulsk-12. The red team goes forward to cover the blue team's extraction, and the blue team travels backward to cover the red team's extraction as they work together in a temporal pincer movement. Neil is on the blue squad, whereas the protagonist, Ives, and Neil are on the red team. Halfway through the operation, Neil uses a temporal style to invert back to forward to alert the protagonist and Ives to a trap that he saw being set by Volkov, one of Sator's men. Neil's efforts, though, are infutile. Ives and the protagonist walk inside the tunnel and become trapped there. They dig down further and discover Volkov monitoring the doomsday weapon from behind a barred fence. In addition, they observe Volkov lying next to a blue team member who has a red rope fastened to his luggage. From the upper siege, the protagonist recognizes this unidentified guy. Through a communication device in the tunnel, Sator discusses his strategy with the protagonist with him from the boat. Sator explains that they have no choice but to go back to the past because that future is perishing. As soon as the dead body emerges, Sator commands Volkov to shoot the protagonist in the head. Volkov complies, and the gate opens. Killing Volkov and obtaining the doomsday device are done by the protagonist and Ives. After closing the gate, the member of the blue team returns to the entrance. The clock is ticking. The protagonist and Ives cling on as they are pulled up by Neil, who has switched roles halfway through, after he tosses a rope through the opening at the top of the tunnel. On the boat, Sator is killed by Kat. The world is saved even though the explosion occurs. Kat jumps into the ocean after realizing she is the woman she had seen on the boat in her previous life. The algorithm is divided into 3 parts by Ives and given to Neil, the protagonist, and himself. They should keep it a secret, Ives emphasizes. In preparation for going back inside, Neil hands the protagonist his piece. Neil has a scarlet string attached to his back, which is when the protagonist first observes it. Consequently, he concludes that Neil was the disguised figure who rescued him during the upper siege and the blue team member who was slain by Volkov inside the tunnel. Upon learning his friend's fate, the protagonist sobs. According to Neil, he has known the future protagonist for a long time because he employed him into this business in the past. Neil returns to the operation with the blue team after telling the protagonist that he will see him at the beginning. After all of the movie's events, the protagonist intervenes to save Kat from being killed by Priya, explaining that it is his responsibility to tie up any loose ends and that, in the past, he had been the head of Tenet operations for 2 years. Well, that's all for today's video. We hope you enjoyed it, and please support us by subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to get notification for new videos every we post.